Well, this is another in the series of Owatonna as They Saw It. Thanks for joining us. I'm Todd Hale, your moderator on our program. Our taping date is January the 27th of 1994. And we're going to talk about a subject matter that certainly is dear to my heart, and that is railroads. And the days of the passenger trains in particular that used to serve the Owatonna area. In particular, on our program here on the Owatonna as They Saw It, we're going to remember the Rock Island line that served Owatonna from Minneapolis down to Kansas City, the depot located on Riverside Avenue in Owatonna. And of course, we had not only the Rock Island Railroad, but we had the Chicago Northwestern and the Milwaukee Road, which had numerous passenger trains coming through Owatonna. We were really a passenger train hub from every direction. Who better to talk about this on our Owatonna as They Saw It series than Pete Schneider here. Pete I have known for many, many years. He was an employee of the railroads, something that he loved from the very beginning, really, from 1947 until he retired in 1988. You can count those. That's 41 years with the railroads, and almost every one of those years, Pete, with Rock Island, right?
That's right. That's right, Todd.
And when he got out of the service, he kind of started as a student with the Northern Pacific, but jobs weren't available at the time, and all of a sudden, Rock Island advertised for some men, and you guys grabbed it, and indeed, after a bit of internship, he first began his career as a depot agent. Where?
At Solon, Iowa.
In Solon, Iowa.
Solon, Iowa. I was a student there from January until March 28th.
Okay.
And the depot agent over there got ill, and they needed an agent over there, so they established me as a depot agent at Solon. And then from there I went on to Waterloo, Iowa, and I worked at Cedar Falls, and I worked Vinton, Iowa, and then from there I went up to Inver Grove. I was a telegraph operator there for some time. I worked Minneapolis. I worked in the ticket office at Minneapolis, and then back to Waterloo, and this was about 1950. When I and my wife, Rita, were married, and we went back to Waterloo for about a year and a half, and then from there we went, then I bid this job in at Allendale, Minnesota, and I was a depot agent there for about a year and a half, and then this job came open at Clark's Grove, which is the neighboring town just south of Allendale, and so I worked, I got that job, I bid that job in, and I worked there till 57, and then this job at Owatonna came open when Bob Sutendorf, if you remember him, he retired, and the job came open, so I just hoped and prayed that I was going to get this job because I just loved Owatonna, because we came up here, you know, a few times when we were at Allendale and Clark's Grove. And so, yes, and then I got this job in 57. And I worked Owatonna until 1973. Okay. So I was working on Riverside Avenue there, and made many trips down there. So
that depot obviously is no longer there, but and incidentally, that depot was on the National Archives, I guess, wasn't it? Huh? It really was, and it was. There was an attempt to save it. There was even an attempt to make it into a restaurant, and much to the concerns of neighbors around, that plan was squelched, and finally it just plain was demolished. It was
the roof caved in, and the city was after the railroad to do something with it, either to make repairs to it or demolish it. So the CNW, they elected to demolish it.
Yeah, because that was at that time then when the Rock Island Railroad went out of business, which was in was that in 57 when when you left Owatonna here, or was it?
No, the Rock Island went into let me think now, 88. They went out of business about 1981. Okay. Because I worked for the CNW for about 7 years. Yeah. Okay. And that was after they went out of business until I retired in 88. So it was 81. Yeah. It was 80 or 81 when they filed bankruptcy, and then of course CNW picked them up, and then they hired us people. Yeah. You know, so.
Well, as I mentioned, Pete, Owatonna was really a passenger, and we're going to kind of specifically talk passenger trains on this edition of Owatonna as They Saw It, although freight went through here on a regular basis as well. But we were really, we had a lot of passenger trains coming through town. Besides the Rock Island, of course, we had 2 of the railroads serving us from east to west, right?
That's right. All right, we had 4 passenger trains. When I first came here in '57, we had 4 each way, 4 north, 4 south, and then the CNW had their 400, if you remember,
to Chicago.
From Rapid City, South Dakota to Chicago. And the reason it was called the 400 because it made that trip to Chicago in 400 minutes. So that's the
if
reason.
everything went right.
That's right. If everything went right, right. And so and I can just see that train coming through because I worked days, of course. I was a depot agent here, and they always came here, and they were pretty much on time. They were coming through here at 11:07.
Right.
11:07 in the morning.
Okay.
And then of course we had the mail. See, and then of course mail was real heavy on the railroads. In fact, everything went on the railroad. So then we had a fellow in town here by the name of Fred Volker that had this contract with the railroads to haul the mail from the CNW to the Rock Island, and then he met all the trains because every train
had
unloaded mail. See,
that was a big way of carrying mail.
And then of course then too, if you remember. REA, remember, the Railroad Express Agency, this Lloyd, what was he's still living, he's retired, Lloyd Warner, his name is. So he worked with us, you know, and then of course he met the trains and with the REA, and then of course the REA had that office, if you remember, on that corner or where the Owatonna Concrete Products is over there. You know, that building over there. See, they built that. They built that.
All right.
They built that building, and they had their offices there until they went out of business. See?
At present, I think Hospitals are in there. That's that brick stone building.
Right.
Yeah, right across from Owatonna Concrete Products. So yeah, mail was a big thing. In fact, and I think we should backtrack a little bit before we talk about some of the specific services. When you started, I assume that it was steam engines.
Yes.
Pretty much, right?
Yes. In fact, I can kind of elaborate on that. When I was a student at Solon, Iowa, and then of course when I worked even Allendale, Clarks Grove, and Solon, I mean Vinton and Waterloo and all that. The only diesels that were on the railroad then were on the passenger trains. And your freight was all hauled or pulled by steam engines.
Okay, all right.
And I'll tell you, it was nice. You could hear that chuk chuk, you know, down the railroad. You know, I'll never forget when I was a student at Solon, Iowa. Solon, I don't know if you know where that is, but it's kind of located like in a little valley kind of. And then surrounding it had a lot of trees and everything. And it was on a beautiful morning. It was clear, crisp, cold, and everything. And we were waiting for this wave freight to come. And here that thing was coming. And the railroad came like out of the woods, through the trees there. And you could see that old smoke coming out early in the morning, see. And that was so nice, and you could hear that chuk chuk, you know, coming down the railroad tracks. No, it was. I
remember
nice.
When I came to Owatonna in 1959. Pretty much diesels were hauling the passenger trains then.
Right.
But once in a while, you'd have they'd had a mechanical problem or something with the diesel, and they'd put a steam engine on. And I remember what a treat it was to watch a passenger train being hauled through Owatonna with a steam engine.
That's right.
Or 2 of them maybe even on. But
and another thing about the steam engines that I can say, like at Vinton, Iowa, we used to pull some real good long freight trains, and when the train would be at a standstill to want to get going with steam engine, so your power is different. You've got those big driving wheels, and the engineer had to do it just right, and a lot of times he would spin his wheel on your steam engines, and then spinning the wheels, your engine was so heavy that it would gouge into your track, see, and then the sparks would come out and everything. But if he's a good engineer, say, he would pull his lever real easy and then kind of go a little bit, and then eventually the train would start to go, see.
I can remember hearing that. It would go, they would have the chug, chug, and then when they'd spin, they'd go chug, 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 right?
Yes,
when it would spin and those wheels would spin and they'd try to get her going.
At night, and you can see the sparks, you know, and, and everything else.
Oh, that's neat. So. Well, again, Owatonna as they saw it. Pete Schneider, who was with the Rock Island from 1957 until he retired in 1988. Is that right?
Right.
And he was a depot agent for many years right here in the city of Owatonna. And not only we mentioned the CNW, but we had the Milwaukee Road coming through. And I got a kick out of it just talking to a fellow the other day who lives along the tracks that go down Highway 218, at least at this particular time. And we all well know that those trains creep along about 10 miles an hour now. And he said back in the days when the passenger trains were going through, they rolled through here and out there at a good pace. So tracks have deteriorated somewhat, haven't they? Huh?
Yeah, very much so. And then, of course, fortunately, like I said, now going ahead just a little bit, when the Rock Island did the file bankruptcy and went out of business, then the CNW, they have this. They call that the spine railroad. This is your spine railroad from the Twin Cities to like through Des Moines and into Kansas City. That they've done a lot of improvement through Owatonna. They've got this ribbon rail that you would say that is true Owatonna now. And if you notice that you don't have the click anymore, it's just a smooth, of your wheels as they go through, because you don't have no joints.
The cars don't even move.
No,
I mean they don't even rock. It's unbelievable.
It's real good. Yeah.
Let me talk about the Rock Island bus. Rock Island Transit provided a bus. I think because, number one, I suppose one of their first stops was the Owatonna Hotel, I suppose, because people came into town, they were going to stay there. But didn't that go to Rochester as well, to the Mayo Clinic and all?
Yes, if I can say a little bit, this Rock Island Motor Transit bus it is a subsidiary of the Chicago, used to be the Chicago Rock Island. And of course, they had this bus service mainly to take the passengers off our trains and take them into Mayo Clinic at Rochester. So we had, sometimes the buses, or the bus was so loaded that we had to hire maybe a couple taxis to follow the bus into Rochester. And of course, they met the bus met the train in the morning. The morning out of St. Louis, you train, and then you're the one out of St. Louis going to Minneapolis, and then the other one from Kansas City to Minneapolis. That was met, and then they would go to Rochester and stay in Rochester until noon, and then bring the passengers from Rochester for the noon rocket. For the noon rocket, and then they would stay here for the afternoon, and then meet the evening train, which was your rocket that came out of Los Angeles, your coach and Pullman out of Los Angeles, from Houston, Texas, at 5:10. And then they would pick up the passengers off that train, go into Rochester, and then come back home, and that was their day.
That was their day.
That was their day. And then, of course...
so they did that 4 times each way?
That's right.
So they had 8 trips.
4 times,
right. 4 times, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the business was good. We had a real good business on them.
Yeah, I know you did. Did you meet any famous people that came through? Rode to the Mayo Clinic, maybe?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really. I mean, I did the only thing about that there was, you had sick people. See.
Oh, sure.
We used to. I'll never forget this one time. We had a person that came on an ambulance. And he was, like bedridden, see? And in order to get him into the Pullman, now he had a bedroom in there, see? In order to get him into the Pullman, we had to take the window out. on the side of the Pullman car, and then to raise them, put them on our baggage car that we had, and then we slipped them in there because I was in there too to help them, and then we just put them to bed in there. See.
Really?
And so that was an experience.
Yeah,
you know, as,
I would guess the train had to sit a few minutes longer than it wanted to get that done.
And then, of course, I might want to add too. You know, especially for our noon rocket, we had bodies. You know, that came from Rochester.
Oh, sure.
See,
yeah.
I'll never forget the biggest load that I had for that noon rocket. And we had a special truck that was made that was elevated. They had rollers, and we used to bring up the casket like this here. They had rollers on the bottom of it, and roll it and twist it. Well, for this one noon rocket, we had 2 little children that died. They were in small, little coffins, you know, and then 2 adults. So the way I did that was put them crosswise on this special cart, and then the 2 little ones on top crosswise this way. See?
Yeah,
And that's the biggest number that I had, see, for that.
At one time, of course, in the early days, every town, no matter how big, I guess, Ellendale, Clarks Grove, Owatonna had their depot agents, had a live person there,
absolutely,
that ran things. And how did you communicate? What was the method of communication?
That was by telegraph.
Telegraph.
That was telegraph. When I first come over here, so we used to have, Faribault was open 24 hours a day. I mean, for a while. And then we had a depot agent at Medford. Then we had, Owatonna was open 24 hours a day for quite a while. And then we had a depot agent at Hope. We had one at Ellendale. We had one at Clarks Grove. We had all night, and the depot was open 24 hours a day at Albert Lee. And then we had a depot agent in Northwood. And then Manly was open 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was just buzzing with railroad.
But you had to know Morse code.
Morse code we had to have.
You had to have Morse code, and that's how you you didn't.
And right
this day and age, it's radio from one
radio.
place to the other. But back then, it was
right. And right to this day, I can still send Morse code.
Is there?
Get me a little bit, maybe a break in for about a couple days, and I could do it again.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. By the way, we mentioned the bus a minute ago, but we didn't mention who drove that bus.
Okay.
Who drove that bus?
Those that drove the buses were George Knowlton. He is still living. He lives in Eota, and that's just east of Rochester.
Okay.
And then we had a fellow by the name of H.L. Peters, but he died. He died quite young.
Okay.
And then and that's it.
That's
Those
all
we
the guys
had.
that drove it.
We had the 2 bus drivers.
Do you remember the name of the Medford agent by any chance that worked with you?
Medford agent. No.
Okay, that
no,
may be hard.
I really don't. But Walt Adams was the agent at Faribault.
Faribault.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then, of course, over here in Owatonna, before I took over, was Bob Sutendorf,
Sure. Better known as Suds.
Suds.
To everybody. Better known as Suds.
That's right.
Got to show you some pictures here if you're interested in what's happened in railroading. This is 1963, August 2nd. This is kind of small, but I want Pete to talk about it. I remember this, 1963. I'm going to put my hands right on either side of the picture here. Okay. Now that train doesn't look like it's on the track, and that's exactly the case. This was out north of Owatonna at the time by Wick's Lumber Yard, right?
Clinton Falls.
Or Clinton Falls.
That's right.
The Rock Island Rocket, southbound, I remember getting the call, had left the tracks, it had hit a gravel truck.
That's right.
Our quarry truck from the quarry.
Right, from the quarry.
And I got out there, and here these 2 engines were laying in the field, or sitting in the field, and the cars were every which way jumbled up. And there must have been 6 or 7 cars that were off the track and rolled over.
That's right. But nobody got hurt.
Nobody got hurt. It was amazing, except for the truckers.
Amazing.
The truckers were killed.
Those 2 were killed. Yeah.
But were you on duty then?
Yes.
Remember the call? And
yes, I tell you that. Okay, and of course the Rock-On, trains or the Twin Star Rocket, they were pretty much on time. I mean, you could just about set your time when they would be just about ready to come in. And their time arrival here was at 12:31.
Okay.
All right. I had my passengers all lined up. I had my Pullman passengers to the rear, that's north of the depot. I had my coach passengers all lined up because he was out of Faribault, and I knew about what time he was going to be in here, see?
Okay.
So then it give you that time to, and then I had my mail truck, but I just had mail, you know, that particular day. So we waited, and we waited, and we waited. God, you know, it was past time arrival, you know, due time. And then what I heard was an ambulance, sirens.
Okay.
I says, uh-oh, something happened. And so then I told the passenger, I said, I don't know. I says, we might be in trouble here. And so then I went to the depot, and then the engineer already walked to Wick's lumber company there to tell him what happened, and talked to the dispatcher, and then he told me what happened. See?
Is that right?
And then of course, then you got this big problem. See, you got those passenger train. I mean, your passengers that want to go. Train is not going to be there. Derailment. And then all the telephoning you had to do, and we had to hire a bus to take those passengers onto Des Moines, and it was just a double work. So, so that's what happened.
Plus, the trouble is, for a period of time, your track was there was no trains going through because the track was blocked, obviously, or torn up. So they had, but they did. I remember, gosh, within about a 24-hour period, they had that track around the mess, and they actually laid temporary track. It was amazing how they did that, but they did.
It didn't take long.
Okay, now I got to show you some other pictures here. I think I lost my place here, and here we go. Now this, Pete can look up at the monitor there, Pete, and you can kind of describe what we're seeing here, and I'm going to hold this up for us to get in the camera, okay? What is this? Okay,
that's what you would say a centralized traffic control. And on there, your different little lights that you see there, the buttons, they are lit up when the train is passing through. So when your signal is actuated on the railroad, it will light up also on the CTC board. See, we call that a CTC board. So you can control right from the office. See that fellow over there with a cap on? Say he's watching. And you can put a train into the siding by this little board over here. By just turning a switch. And I did that quite a bit of times.
It's pretty antiquated, though, compared to what they have today.
Yes.
Right? Yes. Everything's by computer today. And,
right. Right. Oh, yeah.
All right, now here, this is the typical, this was the typical Pete Schneider office here, I think, where he spent a lot of his time. Let me move my hand there. All right, there is the typical
That's right.
Depot, right?
That's a typical depot. You've got your, in the center that you see our train orders, that your different number of copies that the dispatcher will tell you to copy. And then to the left over there, you would see a sounder, which is your telegraph, and then you'll see a kind of like a transmitter. And you're talking to the dispatcher. And then to the left, way over, then you'll see like a little machine over there. See that? With that, you know, later on, then you could talk to the engineer on the train. See. That's to the left over there that you would see.
That was in the later years.
Later years,
yeah. You could talk to the engineer.
But that's a typical office right there.
Yeah, okay. All right, now this is an Owatonna, but I got to show you this because it's kind of typical of what the sites were. I think this is the Des Moines Depot. And here comes the one of the rockets that no doubt went through Owatonna.
That's right.
And came south. They used to back into the Des Moines Depot. I remember taking that train, and they'd operate the train from the rear club car. They had a little control back there, right? And the conductor would run the brake.
That's right. That's right.
And then that's how they didn't have to turn the train around. Then they backed her in, right? And then they headed down to Kansas City.
That's right.
Such okay. These are all black and white. Now this is another typical picture here. I think this is maybe in Kansas City, I think, but again, a good share of these trains went through Owatonna.
That's right. And
I can remember those winter days when these trains would come in and they'd be loaded with ice on the sides.
Yes.
How about winter storms? Did you ever have them where they got buried?
Yes.
Huh?
I'll tell you about that.
Tell me about that.
Okay, when I was a depot agent at Albert Lee, so that's when I got bumped out of Owatonna already. And then I got to be a depot agent at Albert Lee, and we had one of those typical snowstorms, and it was even worse than what we had already now this past week or 2 weeks over here, and where we got a lot of snow, a lot of cold, and everything. And on the railroad, like just north of Clark's Grove, we call them cuts, where your railroad would go through like a little, like a hill, see, and then you would have a cut in there. And that cut, I remember we sent the snowplow out, see, and of course the snowplow was supposed to plow the tracks before we would send a freight train through.
Yeah.
And he got stuck in that cut, see, and he could not move either way. And if you know anything about a diesel, your diesel, when it's covered with snow in your wheels, it gets shorted out.
Oh, you got electric generators.
That's
down
right.
there, right?
It gets shorted out.
Yeah.
And the snow, that's the only thing about diesels, that's bad. And so he was dead. I mean, we had to do something. And so finally, well, first we sent 3 engines out there. He could not pull them out. And we had to get 4 more engines out of Manly, Iowa, to come up, and so we had finally 7 engines all hooked together to pull that snowplow out. So we finally did get them out of there.
Yeah.
See? We had it's terrible. I mean,
and Pete can attest to the fact that we don't have snowstorms like we used to here in southern Minnesota, I think. But I can even remember seeing pictures. These were of steamers, and this must have been back in the early 40s, where they were literally using hand shovels out north of town here to get them out. They were literally packed out. So yeah, indeed, and snowstorms, and of course winter weather obviously affected the time schedules of trains. They ran slow, just like cars do when it gets 20 below zero, right?
Right.
Here's this is dear to Pete's heart because this is Waterloo. I think the Waterloo Depot where you spent.
I spend a lot of time.
But there's a typical scene.
Right there.
Even in Owatonna, you'd see these cars come through, and the conductor would get out and stand there and welcome people on board.
That's right.
Huh?
And then beyond there, you would see that REA truck there. Can you see it over there?
Yeah, I see it.
See, and that's your Railroad Express. See, and that was your big business on the railroad too. See.
Yeah. But now, once again, we had 4 trains going south, 4 trains coming north, and then that was on top of the freight trains that went through.
Freight trains.
There must have been I mean, I'm a train lover. When I hear the whistle, if I'm anywhere close by or the horn, I'll head down to the tracks to watch them go through.
Right.
But there must have been a continual load of trains going back and forth.
We had at least I would judge that we had at least 7 each way, for freight trains now.
Yeah.
This is behind
14 freight trains plus the 8 passenger trains.
That's right. So we had it averaged around 20 to 25 cars. I mean,
trains.
20 to 25 trains in a 24-hour period. See.
Wow.
See. So this was a real busy railroad.
The Milwaukee, which ran over on Highway 218, that ran south down to Austin. Now, did they just have 1 passenger train a day that came through?
As far as I know.
Okay, and Chicago Northwestern had the one. That was the 400.
Had the 400, right.
Yeah, that came through as well.
Yeah.
But many times people connected with those if they wanted to go east or west out of Owatonna here then.
Then this picture, can we have that other one?
Okay, here we go.
Right
this
there.
one here?
Okay, now if you can show, see right here is your Milwaukee passenger train and your C&W. Now this is the depot that it's the
OTC depot.
The OTC depot.
All right, let's get a shot of the top picture here. Now, I should have shown this because there was 2 tracks. Boy, this is going to be. There were 2 tracks.
Yeah.
One was Chicago Northwestern, which was over here.
Yeah.
There's the depot.
Right.
And there's the Milwaukee.
There's your Milwaukee.
And there are 2 passenger trains sitting there. I remember the last day the 400 came through, he was about an hour late or more because every town he went through, they had to stop and do press interviews and all that thing. But
right.
We did the same thing here.
Yeah.
But when that last train went through, this was back in this picture was back in the steam days. These are all steam engines. Yep. So these this would be maybe it says in here what year that was. 1900s, in the early 1900s. Yeah.
Probably 1920 or whatever.
Pete, what do you think led to the demise of the passenger trains?
Well, it just
were the airlines the problem?
No, well, the airlines were coming into the picture, and then of course, and then your highways were getting better.
Yeah.
And then you had your cars, and
your trucks,
and your trucks, right?
Yeah.
And then I would say that even the management of your railroad, they kind of liked or they wanted to get out of that passenger.
They wanted to get out of the, it was a money-losing entity, right?
And then, of course, when your mail got on the highways then it took that mail off the train, see, because I always would say that was like a subsidy to the railroad to haul mail on the trains, because the government, paid, for that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So that was.
So when the mail got off the railroads, then what else was there? So take them off.
Take them off. So. Yeah. So, and of course, when that all happened, when the money got short, the service went downhill. People started complaining about services, and the trains weren't kept up as well as they were, and you could kind of see it gradually coming. And of course, the only thing at this particular point that held passenger service together was when Amtrak came about. Yeah. And they're having financial problems as well. So.
And then of course we might want to add too, if you read the paper here the other day, where this, eventually, I still predict that we're going to have a passenger train through here. Yeah. But now, see, that's been put on the back burner, they said, because of the floods and floods through Iowa there and so on, last year. Yeah. So eventually, we might get a passenger train through here.
We might. We might. And of course, Amtrak's had their problems with accidents and so on. It's just one of those things. So. But nevertheless, it has really been fun to sit and reminisce with this guy. There were many other, of course, veteran railroaders in Owatonna here. Ernie Tooves was one. He was the Chicago Northwestern agent for many years. Yep. And of course, it has been fun for us to indeed remember the Rock. And I'm going to show you this once again, because this is what it was all about. And used to come through Owatonna, and people that lived along the railroad down on Mosier Avenue used to time their day with these trains, and a lot of them would go out and wave at the crews as they'd go by.
Wave at the engineer and the conductor.
Wave at the engineer and conductor as the trains would go by and come into Owatonna. One thing I wanted to mention before we wound this up, I worked with Pete when I was at the radio station when the Royal American shows, which was the carnival at the Minnesota State Fair, and they traveled by rail. And I don't know, we may have been one of the only towns that warned the whole population when those carnival trains were going to come through town on their way back down south from the Minnesota State Fair, and we would put it on the air, and the trains come through, and here was this whole aggregation of cars and people down watching this train come through.
This train come through. I mean, it was a beautiful train because it had all the different the colors. It was a nice train. Then we had two trains. Remember?
Usually one following the other one.
Following the other one. Yeah.
By just a few minutes, huh?
And we had 3 units under. I'll remember that too. Yeah, that was fun.
Pete, I'll tell you, it's fun. We could sit and reminisce all day long. Look at the time here. We didn't think we were going to fill the time, and we're up to past 30 minutes here, huh?
It is,
But here's a guy who will remember his railroad days and touched the lives of so many Owatonnans, because he was the one that sold them their tickets.
That's right.
He was the one that got them set, where to go, where to get on when those trains had come through.
And right today, people have been coming to me, well, not too many people, but some of the older ones, they say, remember, Pete, when you used to make reservations for me, this and that? Oh, yeah, well, I mean, it's pretty hard to remember specific faces. But yes, a lot of friends.
A lot of friends.
And a lot of repeat business, too.
Yeah, a lot of repeat business as well. We hope you have enjoyed remembering the Rock, and indeed remembering the days of the passenger railroads here in the city of Owatonna.
That's right.
Thanks, Pete.
Yeah,
you bet.
Betcha.